Hey everybody, and welcome back to Art School Decoded. Professor Z here. In today's video, we're going to talk about the 5 archetypal professors that you are likely to run into if you are starting art school this fall, and how to rock their classes. So let's dive right in. Professor number 1. I've titled Professor number 1, Professor Hardnose. This type of professor is the one that will haunt your darkest nightmares. Like, no lie, this is the professor that you get and you wake up in a cold sweat before classes. This professor has earned the hype around their reputation, and you know what I'm talking about. The reputation for being a hard ass, the reputation for taking no shit off of anybody, the reputation for being overly demanding, having overly challenging classes, having overly challenging assignments. They don't play. They come correct and they expect their students to as well. This professor believes that their job is to challenge you and push you, and they make you work for it. They don't really care about your other classes, and they don't care that you have a job. They don't care that your grandma's sick or that your childhood dog just passed away. All they care about is one thing and one thing only, and that's the quality of the work that you're producing in their class. And that's it. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Professor Hardnose sounds like a total dick. Like, I don't want to take their class. But I strongly suggest that no matter what type of art student that you are, if you have an opportunity to take a class with this demanding professor, Professor Hardnose, you really should do it. You're not going to get a whole lot of warm and fuzzies from Professor Hardnose, but you will be pushed and you will be challenged. And this is the kind of thing that can really help you improve as long as you're willing to commit to the work and commit to the curriculum. Everything about Professor Hardnose is no nonsense. They mean business. You might get a slight smile at the beginning of class, but ultimately they're going to be early or on time and they expect the same of their students. They are most easily identified by their professionalism, and that means in their clothing, in their demeanor, even in their course materials. You're not going to get any typos in your syllabi. Everything's going to be meticulously planned. You're going to get really dense course materials, really dense assignment sheets, very specific. Chances are they could be clinging to death and they're going to show up to teach class anyways. So they're going to expect the same of you. So your little, I don't feel so good because I drank too much last night, is not going to be a viable excuse to mix class with Professor Hardnose. No sick days, no early releases, no coming to class late. You gotta be on your A game. Chances are that if you take a look and you Google Professor Hardnose, they're gonna have a really impressive CV. It means that they're gonna have a lot of professional experience or a lot of teaching experience. The only way to earn their respect is with the quality of your work and your dedication and your commitment to their course. The other thing you have to be prepared for with Professor Hardnose is harsh criticisms, of which there will be many. So learn to take it in stride. You're not going to get any fuzzy, great jobs. You're not going to get any gold stars on your paper. What you're going to get is whether or not you've succeeded, and if you haven't succeeded, you're going to get a lot of feedback on what you need to do to improve. They're not going to tell you what you're doing right. They're going to tell you what you're doing wrong. And this is not to be overly draconian or to hurt your feelings or to be mean. This is because they're trying to make you better. And the philosophy that a lot of hard-nosed professors carry is that their job is only to help you see what you're not doing well and help you to elevate to the level of doing it better. They're not there to give you a pat on the back. You know, if you need a pat on the back, there's another professor archetype that we're going to talk about in just a minute who can probably help you out with that. My advice to you is don't be scared to take these classes because they're hard classes. Challenge yourself. That's why you enrolled in college in the first place. You're smart. You can do it. You've got it all. You just have to be willing to work for it, okay? So that's Professor Archetype number 1, Professor Hardnose. All right, so let's talk about Professor Archetype number 2. I like to dub this professor Professor Nurture, or Student-Focused Professor. I think if I had to choose an archetype that I fit in most readily when I was still in the classroom, it would be this archetype. This professor is in it because they truly love and believe in education. This professor most likely has a reputation on campus of being admired and respected by faculty and students alike. What you might be thinking is, wow, I mean, who wouldn't want to take classes with Professor Nurture, right? Professor Nurture is going to be there to give you a pat on the back, can kind of like help salve the wounds that you get from Professor Hardnose, this might be a really great person to work with. I think there are some downfalls to Professor Nurture that I want to just go over real quick. Like the ones for Professor Hardnose are really easy to see. The ones for Professor Nurture are a little bit tougher to identify. So let's kind of dive in. Some of the cons of working with Professor Nurture. They can be overly attentive at times, which means that sometimes they can focus too hard on one or two students who are really struggling, and then the rest of the students in the class maybe don't get as much feedback or as much attention as they might like. Also, because they can be so encouraging and so nurturing and compassionate, they may not push you as hard as you are capable of being pushed. And that might sound great, right? Like you need the break, especially if you're also taking a class with Professor Hardnose. But ultimately, again, you're here to push yourself. You're here to do better and to make better work. So I think that it's important to know that if you're working in a class with Professor Nurture, so that you can ask Professor Nurture to push you if you need that. They're going to be great to give you constructive feedback and praise, particularly if you need to know what you're doing well, kind of to counterbalance what you're doing wrong from Professor Hardnose's classes. Professor Nurture is a good person to seek out. Even if you're not in a class with this person, they might be able to meet with you one-on-one and to give you a second opinion. Because sometimes it's great to hear what you need to improve, but we all have egos that get bruised, and every now and then it's nice to hear what you're doing correct and what you're doing well. They're going to give you the warm fuzzies, right? They always seem to brighten the room. However, Professor Nurture can be a ticking time bomb, so be careful to steer clear when they get angry. What I have found is those overly kind, kind of motherly, mentor type professors are awesome, but when you cross them, man, they blow up. I can attest to this. Ask my students what happens when Z gets real mad. Y'all tell them. The class is always going to be a good mix of work and play. Professor Nurture wants you to enjoy the classroom experience as much as they do. So as such, they're going to keep the classroom vibrant and lively. So you don't have to come in expecting a 3-hour lecture or silent studio time. Instead, you can look forward to things like games and activities. There's going to be outings, demos, workshops, and lectures are going to be mixed in from time to time. Professor Hardnose is going to be more hierarchical, like kind of the sage on the stage type teacher, whereas Professor Nurture is going to be a little bit more democratic in how they run their classroom. So professor archetype number 3 is called Professor Apathy, or the complacent professor. So Professor Apathy is probably the most problematic professor that you'll run into during your time in art school. And honestly, as a colleague, they're the worst. Like, the worst. So let's talk about how do we identify Professor Apathy. Professor Apathy is super chill. In fact, students are going to flock to their classes, and their classes are always going to be full or have a wait list. Why is that? Because they're easy. They're too easy. And I'm not talking easy like Professor Nurture, because Professor Nurture is going to make you work still. I'm talking easy like you show up, you have a pulse, and you're not a dick, you're going to pass. And that can be a problem, especially in a studio art class, because you should be producing and your work should be improving throughout the course of the semester. The mindset that I want you to take into account if you're going to be going into a class with Professor Apathy is that you are going to have to push them to give you what you need. It's kind of like a role reversal. Professor Apathy is going to be super relaxed, and they're going to seem pretty much indifferent to everything. Chances are they're going to be well liked by students and colleagues because they don't rock the boat. Instead, they're going to show up for class, probably without notes or materials, and kind of just wing it. And you're going to get that sense. Like, sometimes a professor will show up for class and they don't look like they have any notes and they just jump right into their lesson. But when they do, they talk with a sense of confidence, they know what they're talking about, and you get the impression that they've delivered this material many times before. With Professor Apathy, it's kind of like they just showed up and they were like, all right, what was I supposed to do today? Oh yeah, we're doing this thing. This is what it's about. And so it'll feel a little disjointed, and it'll feel like they're kind of indifferent to it, because they are. And what you'll notice is that because they act like that, the vast majority of the students taking their class are going to act like that too. Because whether you realize it or not, the professor really does work to set the tone of the classroom and the tone of the semester. Now, the students in Professor Apathy's class are going to be okay with this for the most part, because they're all going to be too busy trying to finish their work for Hardnose to even care. Apathy is most likely a middle-aged or older professor, and they've been at the university for 10 plus years, and they're on the verge of retirement. They're just coasting, and as such, they're going to let you coast in class. Now this sounds great, right? Oh my God, I need a break. I need a class where I can just coast. But I want to caution you against this because I really think that it can do you more harm than good, especially if it's a class that's focused on your area of concentration or in your major. You're going to want to get more out of it than just coasting. Professor Apathy may begrudgingly lecture or instruct from time to time, but most often, I'm going to say like 75% or more of the class will just be work time, during which no one actually works. So how can you succeed with Professor Apathy and how can you get more from them? Here's the thing. You may be thinking, well, Professor Apathy has nothing to offer me, so why bother? I'll just take the class and pass. And sure, you could do that. But the truth of the matter is, I think Professor Apathy actually has a shit ton of experience, usually, and they know their field extremely well. So they actually could be an amazing resource for you if you demonstrate to them that you are not apathetic and lazy, right? So if you hunker down and really push yourself in this class because no one else is gonna, and you go above and beyond what's expected of you, then you can get Apathy's attention and possibly additional tutelage, which can actually help you out quite a bit in the long run. This can reignite the spark in Professor Apathy to kind of more engage with you and more engage in your learning and your success. So while it might not change how they run their classroom, it will change how they work with you. And so if you let them know that you're willing to really dive in, to work hard, that you're actually interested and you're actually committed, Professor Apathy can give you a lot of resources that maybe the other students won't get. So it's something that you can kind of put in your pocket and take advantage of for later. So let's talk about Professor Archetype number 3. This is Professor Frazzled, or unorganized. It's really easy to get frustrated with poor Professor Frazzled. They try to be good at their job, they really, really do. But alas, organization, structure, planning, these are just not in their wheelhouse. Professor Frazzled has taken on way too many outside of the classroom responsibilities, or they just have a lot going on in their studio practice, which makes course prep and classroom instruction secondary in their list of priorities. Most of the time, if you talk deeply to Professor Frazzled, they don't really want to be a professor. It was just a way for them to continue to make studio work, and so now they're stuck in this job and they have to do it, and it just frustrates them and irritates them. And then in turn, frustrates and irritates their students. Perhaps Professor Frazzled is well liked by other people, but my guess is the majority of their course reviews are mixed or negative, and students will probably be open about finding the classroom experience extremely frustrating because of its lack of focus. So how do we identify who Professor Frazzled really is? They are consistently late to class. This professor acts more like a student than like a professor. They are very meek usually and have a hard time controlling or leading the classroom. Professor Frazzled has a super messy office, is unkempt in their look, and never seems to get assignments graded on time. Most likely they will ask questions like, okay, so where were we? Or what were we supposed to be doing today? Or my personal favorite, just work on your projects, right? Like that's the end all. If they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, they're like, oh, just work on the stuff you're supposed to be working on. Poor Professor Frazzled. If you have a class with Professor Frazzled, then the name of the game is going to be patience. You're just going to have to be patient. Most of the students are going to coast along and do the bare minimum, and you'll notice that this adds to Professor Frazzled's frustrations and anxieties. Professor Frazzled doesn't want their students to coast. They want their students to do well. They just don't have the skills, I think, to help their students do well. And as such, they just get really irritated that nobody's working hard. Classes are going to be kind of a shit show. How do you succeed in a class with Professor Frazzled? Take initiative. So Professor Frazzled is actually a really good ally for you if you play your cards right. Most of the students are gonna bitch and moan about having to be in the class with this professor, and the other half that aren't bitching and moaning are just gonna coast. They're just not gonna give a shit. They're too busy worried about hard-nosed classes to even care. So if you actually apply yourself in this class, you can win favor with Professor Frazzled, and you can get a lot more out of the class. While organization and planning are weak, Frazzled does know their field well and can be an amazing resource. So seek time with Frazzled one-on-one, like try to get office hours, try to have them do like one-on-one crits with you. And if you do these things and you kind of demonstrate that you have initiative, that you're a self-starter, that you're not frazzled and disorganized, then this might be something that Professor Frazzled can look at and really respect, and ultimately can help you out along the way. All right, so let's talk about our fifth and final professor archetype for art school. I call this one Professor Overworked, or the part-timer. Now, they're not always the same professor, but usually they go hand in hand. Now, Professor Overworked is by far the hardest professor to get a read on. Most likely, this is an adjunct professor who's working part-time for shit pay. But I don't want you to think that because they're a part-time employee that they don't have anything to offer you. Don't let the position and the title fool you. Chances are, especially in the arts, that this weekend warrior is kicking ass and taking names outside of academia. And that's important for you to be aware of. Either they're going to be super active in their field and this is just a part-time gig because they really like teaching, or they are younger, early to mid-career artists who are looking to break into teaching full-time. Either way, you have a lot you can learn from this person outside of the classroom as well as inside of the classroom, especially if you're willing to take the time to connect with them. Usually they're going to be very young and very enthusiastic, albeit a bit jaded. Or if they're not jaded, they're going to be way overly idealistic. It's going to be one or the other. Most likely they're going to be young, I would say within 10 years of the students that they're teaching, and they're going to be very, very active in their professional practice. They are likely teaching at times no one else wants, so these are going to be your super late or your super early classes. They will be overly structured, they're going to be overly planned, and most likely overly ambitious. You will look at your syllabus and your assignments and you're going to think, what the what? Like, this feels like it should be for grad students. And you would be right, it probably should be for grad students. Most adjuncts are newer professors, and as such, they try to teach their undergrad classes like grad school light. So they ask way too much of their students, especially at the foundations level. And you might even notice, like, you're looking at your assignments and you're thinking, oh my God, Professor Overworked is asking for more than Professor Hardnose. And we know that's ridiculous. But don't worry, Professor Overworked will learn very quickly to rein in their expectations and to kind of balance out how much they're asking for from the students. You're going to want to work on a peer relationship with them. Ask to see their work or their research, or even offer to help them in their studio. We all always need studio assistants. So like that can be a really great way not only to learn, but to connect with this person as a mentor. These sorts of mentor-mentee relationships can actually be really valuable because unlike the other professors that we've gone through and we've mentioned, Professor Overworked is not long for this particular institution. So what that means is they're here and they're adjuncting now, but they are actively looking for full-time work at another institution, or they're looking for full-time work outside of academia, or they're freelancing, or they've got solo shows and exhibitions. They're busy, they're overworked, right? Most likely because of that, they are not comfortable in the way that the other professor archetypes are comfortable. So they're going to be hearing about chances for internships or freelance work well before your other professors do. Likewise, take your crits in stride with Professor Overworked. They may be overly verbose, or they might pontificate or use language that references that you're just not familiar with yet. And it's like the symptom of just having come out of grad school. They talk like they're still in grad school. Don't just nod and smile and pretend to know what they're saying. That's what most of the students are going to do. Instead, ask questions. They love to teach. That's why they're there. They love to answer questions. So if Professor Overworked says something or references something that you're not familiar with, ask about it. If you're hungry for knowledge, they're going to be super excited to work with you. And while they may lack classroom management skills or even just kind of teaching skills in general, they often make up for that in practical experiences and in fresh resources that they can offer to you. What I really want you to get from them, not only the material you're getting in the classes, I want you to really watch them and learn how to be a functioning studio artist, not just an art student. That is the one thing that Professor Overworked is going to be able to show you probably better than any of the other archetypes we've gone over. Whether you have somebody that fits hard nose to a T or is kind of like a dash of hard nose and a sprinkle of overworked, hopefully understanding a little bit about who these professors are and why they are the way they are will help disarm some of the personality conflicts that happen between professors and students, especially at the beginning of the semester. This is my number one piece of advice, and I think that it should go without saying, but somehow students seem to forget this. Remember to try. I mean it, really try. Seriously, when students actually try, we are so much more willing to invest our time and our effort to help. So some ways that you can demonstrate to a professor that you are actually trying. Do the homework. Do the readings. I know that that sounds silly, but we don't assign it just to piss you off and to kill your weekends. If your professor has assigned some sort of homework, some sort of readings, some sort of research that they've asked you to do, they've asked you to do that so that you have the proper context to engage in the discussion or to engage in the material that's being delivered in the next class. So do it. And when you do it, they're going to be so much more willing to help you. Even if you do it and you don't understand it, you have to at least try. When you just kind of skim through it and you just rush through it to get it done, you're cheating yourself. You're not only cheating yourself of the material that you're being taught, but you're cheating yourself of the opportunity to connect with the professors that can and will help you with your professional development after you leave college. Now, I can't stress this enough. I graduated from VCU in 2006. So I was there as an undergrad from 2002 to 2006. So it's been a hot minute since then, and I'm still very close to my undergrad professors. They've written me countless letters of recommendation. They have been amazing mentors to me when I needed help or I needed advice. They've sent me job opportunities that I wasn't aware of, or things that they thought would kind of tickle my fancy, opportunities for shows, and they've invited me. They gave me my opportunity to adjunct right after grad school because I demonstrated that I was the type of student that was really invested in my education. So I think that it's really important to remember that they're not just there for the semester, or they're not just there for your program, and they're not just there to give you a grade. They really are there to help kind of direct you and give you pathways to success if you are willing to do the work for it. If you're not, then they're going to invest that time in somebody else. So why not make it you? Why not give yourself every opportunity for success that's available to you? And part of the way to do that is to connect with your professors. So I hope that this video was helpful. Of course, like always, if you have questions, please leave them in the box down below or shoot me an email. I'm happy to help. I know that we're right around the corner from the semester starting, so I just want to say to all of my kittens, whether they're my digital ones or my former ones in real life, I hope you guys have an awesome semester. If you have questions, reach out. I love you guys, and I can't wait to upload my next video. Please take it easy, have fun going back to school, and be nice to your professors, even if they're apathetic or frazzled. Love you guys. Bye!